Thanks for joining me again for this edition of NSX Insider. My name is Jimmy Ray Purser, and I'm the Senior Engineer for NSX. Hey, you know what? We're going to talk about DMZ Anywhere. What's that? How can you have a DMZ Anywhere and it still be a DMZ? Let's find out. Continuing on with the use cases, DMZ Anywhere is a fantastic feature for customers that fall under any type of regulatory requirements. That could be like PCI, HIPAA, JCO, SOX, GLB, Basel II, whatever the case may be. We can throw acronyms up like crazy here, but the reality of it is that they've got some type of third-party auditor, and there's some real penalties assigned to it. DMZ Anywhere is really a feature they're going to love. Now, before we tell you what it is, let's see what a DMZ actually is and what is the problem with it in today's compute. Well, taking a look at the overall theory of DMZ, it's served us well for a long time, right? Back when we had very static networks, basically what you're looking at is that you have the need for external users to come in and access servers for applications that you are hosting for whatever reason. And most of the time, these are web servers of some kind. They could be FTP servers. Anyway, you've got something that somebody on the outside that you don't know who it is wants, and you want to make sure that they have it. So we're going to set up some sort of screening firewall here, right here in the middle, that's going to actually just kind of weed out the most basic attacks, But the trick on a DMZ is making sure that you have a super strong firewall here so that these same users can't kind of, get a little maliciousness to them and say, hey, let's go access this server and then get down here and access kind of the crown jewels and see what we can steal from the inside of the network, right? So you typically develop, or what's been designed is what we call zero trust, right? Or some people will call it ZTI for Zero Trust Initiative. But that might be a little bit more of a dated term, but the reality of it is what I want to say is I don't want to trust anybody. That's what a DMZ actually does. In a military conflict, you set this up. You really don't trust anybody here, so you got this buffer zone where you're trying to protect each other. You kind of can meet here, but no one should be able to cross either boundary into that area, right? Now, you can see the problems with this already, right? So, number one, how do I, from here, if I'm a network administrator, how do I manage what's going on in here? How do I see the statistics? How do I know if, my CPU usage is spiking and I need to get order a new server or reconfigure this, that type of thing? How do I vMotion this from one to the next, right? Because here's the dichotomy. I want everybody to access this, but I want to be able to make sure that I can still have the flexibility to move this, to have some redundancy from one data center to the next, because this is what's making me money. So how do I apply that? Well, I have to build another DMZ, build more firewalls out, and anytime you add any type of hardware, that is always going to equal cost, right? Hardware is not cheap by a long shot. Hardware is very expensive. And you also have the problem, is it in stock? Do I have the time? What's my change windows? There's a lot of issues that come with hardware in this environment. So you can see that scalability and flexibility, well, those are not DMZ strong points, right? So what do we do? Well, while we talked a little bit about this being, a logical look at the network, this is probably not what your network is going to look like. It's probably going to look a little bit more like this, right? You're going to have these machines scattered all over the place because, you grow and you add stuff, you decommission hardware and that kind of thing. So let's just say that you have got some regulatory needs you got to make. We'll pick on PCI because that seems to be the most common one here. And let's just say that our machines that we have listed out in red here, well, those machines are the ones that are actually what you would call in scope, right? In scope is really meaning that these are the ones that are under some compliancy guidelines, and they're going to be looked at by the auditors. But they determine what's in scope by what can touch it, right? So if I can say that this VM host 4 can touch this Hyperion, then guess what? Now this one's in scope. Why? Because if somebody compromises this machine, they can get in this machine. If this one's in scope, then probably this one is, and 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 this one is. And that means all these machines that really weren't designed for that, or architected for that regulatory compliance, are now out of compliance. And then guess what? That's right, more money. And paying a fine is really dumb money, right? I mean, it's money that comes out of your budget, and and you have to pay for it. And typically, it's a resume generating event, and nobody really wants seconds on that, right? So, how do you make this a little bit easier? Now, a couple things here. Zero trust is always going to be one of the ultimate goals that we apply here, and I want to give kind of a shout out, kind of like a little commercial inside of this commercial, for an audit we had done by Coalfire. Now, Coalfire took a look at our DMZ Anywhere in particular, and what they said was, man, that's the stuff. I mean, that's how you design networks today. So, and it's very recent, right? We're not looking at a report that we had done back in 2008. I mean, we're looking at a recent report that was just done about a year ago. So Coalfire, take a look at that. You can download it on our website. Drop me an email. If you don't have it, I'll send it to you. jpurser@vmware.com. Great stuff. Really, your customers will love it. Nicely detailed, has topology. Really, really good stuff. So, DMZ Anywhere. What is it? What does it take to take this and put it anywhere? That sounds pretty darn scary, right? Well, the reality of it is that to put things in scope, NSX kind of already does this for you, right? We talked about this in microsegmentation, how when you're building out your environments, how each one of your virtual machines is going to have a firewall. And here's the good news. That firewall is enabled by default, right? So you're not having to go back and oh my goodness, did I turn this one on? Did I turn this one on? No. It's on by default. Now the rule in there is any, of course, right? And when I say the word any, that means that I'm going to pass anything from one side and anything from the other side of the connection, right? Because there's two connections going and coming. And so any just says I'm going to pass both sides of that connection. And then I start trimming this back, right? So like on finance, maybe I only want the finance people to see that. So I have, in essence, I have zero trust with HR, right? And then HR saying, well, I have zero trust with finance and engineering, right? And then DMZ, I can build out a DMZ circuit that's basically going to say, I have zero trust with everything, But here's the advantage by building this out. I still got all my telemetry, right? I love to say the word telemetry. It makes me feel smarter than what I am. So you might hear me say it a few times. But what this does is that this allows you to monitor this server, monitor the health of it. It allows this machine to instantiate, let's say in DC2, and boy, that pen is really writing slow, isn't it? That looks like DC, some weird character. But so this is moving from one data center to the next. And when it does, guess what? The policy follows it, right? The policy is going to follow this device, right? From programming, you'd actually call this an object, right? This object is going to be assigned to that machine. So it's going to follow it no matter where it goes. It's its personality now. So it can move, it can shift all over the place, and we can actually still make sure that that thing meets 100% zero trust requirements. Now, here's the other good stuff. Because if you ever restored a car before, putting in an engine, building a transmission and stuff, while those are pretty tough, the hardest part about restoring a car is making sure the headlights work, making sure the windshield wipers work, making sure the brake lights come on when you hit the brakes, right? That type of stuff is the equivalent of all the stuff we need in the network to make this function. Every network and every machine on here needs some type of Active Directory, some type of network time, some kind of IP address so we know how to talk to it, and a DNS server so we know what its name is and how to solve it back and forth to that IP address, and then certificates for security, for tunneling, that kind of stuff. But the reality of it is these are common services. Sometimes we call these dial tone services. These are a bear to set up in a DMZ environment. Why? Because these are common services. So now do I have to hard set these machines? Which, once again, anytime you hard set anything and lock it in, you've locked it in place. It's not going to be moving anywhere too darn easily. So DMZ Anywhere gives you that functionality to still be able to take advantage of all your common services across the entire data center and not have to make, duplicate services just to service a DMZ out there, and still keep that nice zero trust, right? We'll just say ZT up here. It gives me that ability to secure that. And the great news about DMZ Anywhere, it's 100% compliant with any type of auditing. So for regulations and stuff, we've got manuals, policies, that show how to set that up to kind of speak the language, because you know the regulations are designed by committee, right? So you got to be able to speak the language. We got those type of configuration guides that we can show you. Look, this is how you do. This is what they're saying. This is the equivalency in NSX, and meet those guidelines. But let's talk about a customer that's actually doing this. Columbia Sporting Wear. You guys probably have that stuff to keep warm. I live in Wisconsin. I know that I love that stuff. Keeps me good and warm. So what they did is they had some real challenges, man. They had a couple data centers here, and they had workloads scattered all over the place. And they honestly just didn't have a good way to secure that environment. They had 200 offices globally. 100 of their branches or more were retail sites, what we'll call replicated sites, where you're kind of building out these retail sites as quick as possible with the same template type stuff. And man alive, it was really tough to kind of manage that. So what they do? They gave us a call. And they said, what can NSX do for us? So we brought in Palo Alto as well, so that we could actually do some, what we call DPI, or deep packet inspection stuff, and have that built into NSX2, so that they can actually have this super nice environment that's going to not only give them security inside the data center, but also make them completely independent of their infrastructure around the world, right? And now they can actually have security part of their policy. And when you have a dynamic security policy tied to the application like that, it is so much easier to figure that out, because now anytime I make a move or adjustment or deploy something new, I'm not having to pay extra cash to actually do that, right? It saved them $2 million. Man, that's a lot of money, right? It's so much money that what they said was, well, look, previously, man, we were just treading water. We really were looking for, just trying to keep everything going. Currently, they're saying, wow, man, we can, we're doing better compute, looking at some VDI stuff, looking at private cloud, microsegmentation. We're looking at, this next project they have called Branch 2.0, where they're doing a lot more advanced stuff and still being 100% compliance. And that's the advantage that DMZ Anywhere gives you, right? It breaks you out of that mold of having, being kind of bound to hardware and being fluid, man. I mean, having this nice ubiquitous security layer that's going to still give you zero trust, but be as flexible and dynamic as your data center is. Hey folks, to find out more information about NSX and what it can do for you, check out our Vault page, or if you got any questions, please contact any of our NSX folks out there. Heck, even drop me an email, jpurser@vmware.com. As for me, well, I got an MCP I got to take down.